Hey Planeswalkers, this is Eric from Bane Alley Magic bringing you another weekly deck tech video, and today we're talking with my friend Calvin and we're talking about his Thada Adel Acquisitor deck tech. But before we do, I'd just like to remind you to please hit that like button or that subscribe button. Really helps out. So Thada Adel is a 2/2 Merfolk rogue for 1 and 2 blue, and she has Island Walk, and she says whenever Thada Adel Acquisitor deals combat damage to a player, search that player's library for an artifact card and exile it. Then that player shuffles his or her library, and until the end of the turn, you may play that card. So tell me about Thada.
Thada's a pretty interesting commander. I've been working on a series of mono-colored decks, and she's what I settled on for blue. I wasn't really interested in a super controlling strategy, but Thada seemed like a great way to use some effects I had from other decks I had taken apart, focused on theft.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, obviously this deck is all about stealing your opponent's artifacts, which we all know in Commander. I mean, at least almost everyone should be running a Soul Ring. We looked it up, about 80% of decks are running Soul Ring. I'm assuming the other 20% are just like mono green or really green heavy ramp decks. But yeah, I mean, most decks have at least a Soul Ring, and almost every deck, I'm assuming, has at least a couple artifacts. So that is obviously a really powerful strategy right there. And I'm assuming you looked at other decks online when you built this. Did you put any of your own special twists on it?
Yeah, there's a lot of different ways to build Thada. You can go completely Merfolk strategy with it. I mean, really, primarily people use it for, I believe, the Soul Ring steal. Mana acceleration is a huge deal, especially pumping out tons of Merfolk like that. There were a couple other strategies I looked at. I went with things I had laying around, basically, from, like I said, decks I had earlier. So this is a lot of cards in here that I didn't see in other lists. It may not be perfectly optimized, but it is very definitely mine.
Yeah, and I played against it, so I know, I mean, it works. It does the job, definitely. Would you call this a control deck?
Somewhat of a control deck. There are some control effects, but mostly I'm going to be playing to my opponent's power levels. I'll be cloning and stealing their creatures. So I suppose in a way it is control, but it also definitely scales up the better creatures my opponents are playing.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, just blatant thievery kind of more the way. And any combos, any way to ultimate combo? Or
There are maybe one pretty annoying combo. It's basically impossible to get off, but if I'm playing against 3 or more non-blue playing players, there's a way I can lock out the game with enough luck.
Oh, okay, so as long as no one else is playing blue,
yes,
you can take over. Awesome. Okay, well, let's get into the creatures, of which we have only 14.
Only 14.
But yeah, again, you're going to be stealing your opponent's creatures more often than not, so that's pretty awesome. Oops. Okay, so we're starting with Drift of Phantasms, which is a spirit, a 0/5 with defender and flying for 2 and a blue, and it has transmute for 1 and 2 blue, so you can pay 3 and discard this card, search your library for a card with the same converted mana cost as this card, reveal it and put it into your hand, then shuffle your library and play this only as a sorcery. So there are a number of things we can get with this, but so maybe we'll go back to this card later.
Yeah,
once we have some of those things out.
I do have 3 transmute abilities in the deck, and basically none of them, well, this one in particular will never be cast as a creature.
Right.
This is specifically to transmute.
Yeah, I guess that is an interesting point. Like, you know, you do have, I mean, we counted them up, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 other cards you can tutor up with Drift of Phantasms.
Yes.
But yeah, worst case scenario, you could always have a 0/5 defender flying. Not bad for 3, but yeah, usually not what you're gonna do. Okay, so one of the creatures, we have Trinket Mage. For 2 and a blue, you get a 2/2 human wizard, and when Trinket Mage enters the battlefield, you may search your library for an artifact card with converted mana cost 1 or less, reveal that card and put it into your hand. If you do, shuffle your library.
Yeah, this is going to be a theme with plenty of the cards in the deck. We'll be getting specific things out of my deck. This one, for the Dream, will get me my Soul Ring, but 1 or less allows me to grab a non-basic land, artifact land, if there's one still in the deck. Generally, this is just a way to thin the deck and also get a creature on board. I don't have many, so having early blockers is a boon.
Mm-hmm. So you're often getting an artifact land or a soul ring with this? Or...
Yeah, soul ring, Wayfarer's Bauble, and potentially an artifact land are the three things I can grab with this.
Ramp, ramp, ramp.
Yep.
Okay, on to Trophy Mage, 2 and a blue for another human wizard, which is also a 2/2, and when Trophy Mage enters the battlefield, you may search your library for an artifact card with converted mana cost 3, exactly 3, reveal it and put it into your hand, and then shuffle your library.
This hits less than the Drift of Phantasms. It's the same thing, but gets me a body as well. I think it's got 6 possible hits, and one of them is the same lockout piece that I usually would be looking for with the Drift of Phantasms. But in a pinch, it also grabs me protection for my commander, can double my mana potentially with Exoplanar Lens, or if I feel like I'm set up well enough, the very chaosy Chaos Wand. Yeah,
and also, you can get Trophy Mage with Drift of Phantasms, right? And then cast it if you got the mana, and then get something else, right? Nice little chain there. All right, and then we have Archaeomancer, another human wizard for 2 and 2 blue this time. And when Archaeomancer enters the battlefield, return target instant or sorcery card from your graveyard to your hand. So...
quite a few of those. It's just value recursion, and it gets me a creature. I could have potentially put many less creatures into this deck, but you do need creatures when you're being when you don't know what you're going to be up against. You could be facing aggro, and you do need things down in order to help assuage that early damage.
Yeah, and, I've seen it, it doesn't look like much, but when it gets you another card, that's really powerful.
Very nice.
This is like your blue version of Eternal Witness here, practically. All right, then we have Duplicant, 6 mana for an artifact creature shapeshifter, which is a 2/4, but it has imprint, so when this enters the battlefield, you may exile target non-token creature, and as long as a card exiled with Duplicant is a creature card, Duplicant has the power and toughness and creature types of the last creature card exiled with Duplicant, and it's still a shapeshifter.
Yeah, I don't include bounce effects in the deck, and I do not believe I have any way to get this back from my graveyard, so any of these creature removals or any other type will be mostly one-offs. So this is just a nice piece of removal in blue for exiling a creature.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and blue needs solid removal when it can get it. Absolutely.
Especially when they're not counterspells. So.
Here is a card that keeps me up at night. Gilded Drake, a 3/3 Drake for 1 and a blue, and it has flying, but none of that matters because when Gilded Drake comes into play, you exchange control of Gilded Drake for target creature one of your opponent's controls, or sacrifice Gilded Drake. So as soon as you cast this, you just get to steal something, and your opponent gets Gilded Drake instead.
Quite an amazing effect for 2 mana. Again, if you were blinking this or flickering it, it would be extremely easy to abuse, but as a one-off effect, I feel like this is very fair. Well, fair, I suppose.
Yeah, we'll go with that. Sounds good. Okay, another fair card here. Perplexing Chimera, or as I like to call it, the Chimera. For 4 and a blue, the Chimera is a 3/3 enchantment creature, and whenever an opponent casts a spell, you may exchange control of Perplexing Chimera and that spell. If you do, you may choose new targets for the spell.
Quite an interesting card. This one is definitely pretty pet. It fits the theme of the deck a bit with the theft of other people's things, but for 5 mana, it's quite expensive. The effect is absolutely hilarious, however.
Yeah, especially when someone makes a copy of it, and then you have this never-ending loop of like, well, I gain control of it, well, I gain control of it, well, I gain control of it, and someone else like me is like, guys,
It is.
You gotta agree on something.
It can be frustrating. You do need to actually agree with your opponent on the target for a spell, but
yeah. If there's two of these out, it gets really
hopefully it never
awkward.
comes up again.
I don't mind entirely, just as long as people make it. You might have noticed this happened the other day, and I was just like, guys, you gotta decide. You gotta make a choice. This game will never go. All right, next we have Sphinx Ambassador. 5 and 2 blue for a 5/5 flying Sphinx. And when Sphinx Ambassador deals combat damage to a player, search that player's library for a card. Then that player names a card. If you searched for a creature card that isn't the named card, you may put it onto the battlefield under your control. Then that player shuffles his or her library. God.
This is a wordy card, and expensive, but the effect is just the best. I'm going to know what's in their decks already with Thada Adel. This is going to be another thing where I have things that take from people's decks directly. But I already know what's in there. I already know what I want. It may not be the best. Well, hopefully not the best, because that's what they'll choose. But this is just a favorite of mine.
I mean, yeah, you're definitely going to be searching for a creature, or else she does nothing.
She shuffles their deck, I suppose.
The other thing is the opponent has one chance to keep that creature. They got to guess exactly what it is.
In a non-commander format, there's very limited possibilities, so it's much easier to guess. In Commander, upwards of 30 creatures in decks, there's very little chance that you're going to be guessing the creature.
So there's still a chance.
There's
Next we have Clever Impersonator, a 0/0 shapeshifter for 2 and 2 blue, and you may have Clever Impersonator enter the battlefield as a copy of any non-land permanent on the battlefield.
Bonkers. This gets me planeswalkers. This gets me ridiculous enchantments. I can make it a copy of everything. These will be the next few cards are all my clones in descending order of usefulness, I suppose, or goodness. So Clever Impersonator, top tier clone.
Yeah, absolutely. Phyrexian Metamorph is 3 and a Phyrexian blue, so you can pay that with either blue mana or 2 life. And it's a 0/0 shapeshifter, artifact creature, and you may have Phyrexian Metamorph enter the battlefield as a copy of any artifact or creature on the battlefield, except it's an artifact in addition to its other types.
That's exactly what it says it is.
Yeah.
This has the upside of being able to be cast for 3 mana and 2 life as opposed to 4 mana, bringing down the curve just slightly.
I like this artwork much better.
Yeah.
Next we have Stunt Double, 3 and a blue for a 0/0 shapeshifter. This one has Flash, and you may have it enter the battlefield as a copy of any creature on the battlefield.
A strictly better clone has Flash.
Flash is great. Fairy Artisans, 3 and a blue for a 2/2 Fairy Artificer with flying, and whenever a non-token creature enters the battlefield under an opponent's control, you create a token that's a copy of that creature, except it's an artifact in addition to its other types. Then exile all other tokens created with Fairy Artisans. So basically, whenever anything enters the battlefield, you get a copy of it, but you only get 1 copy of anything.
Yes, and it's gets to use your opponent's enter the battlefield abilities. The only downside with this is you don't get to choose. There can be interesting implications with something like a Phage, the Untouchable.
Right? Oh! Yeah. So if your opponent sees this and happens to have something special, you could be in trouble. But I think most of the time, you're just getting great value out of this card.
Yes.
Definitely. Next we have Vidalcan Plotter, 2 and a blue for a 1/1 Vidalcan Wizard. And when Vidalcan Plotter comes into play, exchange control of target land you control and target land an opponent controls.
Again, if my opponents aren't playing islands, this is a way to give them islands. I don't have much way to abuse Island Walk outside of my commander, but
that's just where it's needed.
She needs it.
I've seen this happen many times. You give that island to the player not playing blue, and suddenly they can't block you either.
This also has the upside of being able to take an important land from an opponent very early on, where if someone's in 3 colors, I can potentially deny them 2 of their colors with a dual land of some sort. It can be quite cruel.
Yeah, definitely. You can get their Glacial Chasm or Cabal Coffers. Lots of things. Next, Stormtide Leviathan is an 8/8 Leviathan for 5 and 3 blue, so 8 mana total. and it has Island Walk, and it says all lands are islands in addition to their other types, and creatures without flying or Island Walk can't attack.
Quite good. Forces my strategy again. Lets Thada get in. Also prevents a lot of combat damage from happening later in the game.
Yeah.
It's fantastic.
Yeah, actually, I mean, this is, a really great sort of blue fogging effect, just preventing damage that would be dealt to you, or more, how shall we say, what do you say, putting up walls, fortifying.
Yeah.
Right? Definitely great protection. I should put this in some other decks too, totally. Because people gang up on me all the time. It's annoying.
Yeah. Once you're starting to do well, you need to put the shields up.
Yep. All right, so on to the non-creature spells, starting with maybe some evasion here, looks like.
It looks like.
We got Aqueous Form, 1 blue for an enchantment aura. An enchanted creature can't be blocked, and whenever enchanted creature attacks, you get to scry 1.
Yeah, this doesn't protect my commander in any way whatsoever, but it allows her to get through. And the scry is a nice upside.
Yeah, for 1 blue, this is actually great value. I have put it in many decks before. I think it's a really good card.
Mm-hmm.
Next we have Spreading Seas, 1 and a blue, and you get to enchant a land with this aura. And when Spreading Seas enters the battlefield, you also get to draw a card, so it replaces itself. An enchanted land is an island.
Quite nice. Good removal for good lands, and lets Thada get through.
Oh, so it just transforms it.
It becomes an island.
Oh, wow. That's too bad. All right. Aquitect's Will. For 1 blue, it's a tribal sorcery, so this also counts as a merfolk spell. And you put a flood counter on target land. That land is an island in addition to its other types for as long as it has a flood counter on it. If you control a merfolk, you draw a card.
Yep, it's a less good Spreading Seas for 1 less mana. Mm-hmm. It's fine. This is a decent card. It is funny that this iteration of flood counter makes it an island in addition to its other types.
Oh, right.
Whereas we will see an island or lands becoming strictly islands with flood counters later on.
And what I like about this is, unlike the other one, the only one we're talking about, Spreading Seas, is that Spreading Seas will eventually, has the possibility, though almost never happens, it has the possibility of removing all the flood counters if everything becomes an island. But, this will make 1 player's land an island pretty much for the rest of the game, no matter what. Aquitect's Will. Mm-hmm. Next we have Swiftfoot Boots, 2 mana for an artifact equipment. Equipped creature has hexproof and haste and has equip 1.
These will be pieces of protection for my commander, hopefully leaving her on board until I get some key pieces out of people's decks or all of the Soul Rings, which is usually my goal.
Yep. Soul Ring Tron. Next we have Cloak and Dagger. 2 mana for a tribal artifact rogue equipment. Wow, tribal artifact. Yeah. Interesting. Equipped creature gets +2/+0 and has Shroud. And whenever a rogue creature comes into play, you may attach Cloak and Dagger to it. Normally it has equip 3.
This is interesting. I'm not running Lightning Greaves, and maybe I should be over this, but this also lets me, with another piece of equipment, potentially push commander damage quite quickly. And that's not the actual strategy of the deck, but it is in there as an alternate win condition.
Yeah, I savor the flavor on this. It's pretty sweet. Rogue Tribal. Okay, next we have Whisper Silk Cloak, 3 mana for an artifact equipment. Equipped creature has Unblockable and Shroud, and it is equipped 2.
Yeah, fantastic. Everything I want for my commander.
Yep. Unblockable. Here we go. Oh boy. Quicksilver Fountain, 3 mana for an artifact that says at the beginning of each player's upkeep, that player puts a flood counter on target non-island land he or she controls. That land is an island as long as it has a flood counter on it. And at the end of turn, if all lands in play are islands, remove all flood counters from them.
So this has never made every land on the board an island. The dream is with one of the lands I have in the deck could potentially create a loop where my opponents will ever only have access to potentially 1 non-island mana every turn if they play a land, right?
Right.
So it's actually been really good as well. Even if it sticks around for only a couple turns, if it's removed, the flood counters don't go away. Those lands don't stop being islands. Mm-hmm. It's caused quite a bit of havoc each time it's been played.
Yeah, and even just once around the table means everyone has an island. All of a sudden,
Yeah.
this is like a prayer. As soon as you play this, everyone's gonna want to destroy it.
Yes.
So I mean, often it won't make it around the table, but if it does, it's done its job for 3 mana. It's made everyone have an island, and all your island walk stuff will get through. Pretty excellent. And it definitely makes everyone groan. You will get a lot of groans when you play this card, but it's pretty fun. I like it actually. It's not like so bad that it ruins the game.
No, there's plenty of time to respond to it.
You get to choose what land becomes
yes,
an island.
You get to choose. I don't get to target.
All right, Wayfarer's Bauble is 1 mana for an artifact in which you can pay 2 mana and tap it and sacrifice it to search your library for a basic land card and put that card onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle your library.
Early ramp, totally fine. I don't have much in here that lets me get out a turn 2 Thada. This doesn't, but it does allow me to thin my deck a little bit, and it's a piece of ramp.
Yeah, and great for anything non-green. Do you put this in any green decks, you think?
Possibly. The only green deck I have would not want it.
And Soul Ring. I think that deck doesn't have a Soul Ring either, does it?
No, it does not.
Next we have Sky Diamond, 2 mana for an artifact. It comes into play tapped, and you can tap Sky Diamond to add a blue mana to your mana pool. Pretty excellent. So we're on to the ramp here, obviously. Next we have Felwar Stone, 2 mana for an artifact. You tap it to add 1 mana to your mana pool. This may be a mana... this old one.
Poorly
Basically,
worded.
it adds 1 mana to your mana pool of any type that a land an opponent could produce.
Yes.
Yeah. Felwar Stone.
Felwar Stone.
Read it. Next we have Thought Vessel. 2 mana for an artifact. It says you have no maximum hand size, and it taps to add 1 mana to your mana pool.
I don't generally draw a terribly large amount of cards in this deck, but as a 2-mana mana rock, you could do a lot worse.
Yeah, and this, I think... Well, no, this is the common, actually. I'm confusing it with something else. But yeah, not an expensive card. A great way to add, and to give any deck no maximum hand size, and a little bit of ramp. So, Mind Stone is 2 mana for an artifact that taps to add 1 mana to your mana pool, or you can pay 1 mana and tap it and sacrifice it to draw a card.
There we go. That's what it says.
Yep, goes in a lot of decks. Almost all of them. Sword of the Animist is 2 mana for a legendary artifact equipment. Equipped creature gets +1/+1, which a lot of people forget. And whenever equipped creature attacks, you may search your library for a basic land card, put it onto the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle your library equipped for 2 mana.
I think the earliest I can use this, I mean, if I play this turn 2, Thought of turn 3, and equip turn 4, that's totally fine. That's as fast as you can do it. Start ramping then. Thought is never not going to be attacking. I want those artifacts.
And in pretty much any creature-based deck, this is one of the best mono-ramp equipments you can have for just 2 mana. Because it can potentially get you a ton of land on the battlefield as long as you're attacking, because they don't have to deal damage. They don't have to connect right as soon as they attack. Next we have Extraplanar Lens, 3 mana for an artifact with imprint. When Extraplanar Lens comes into play, you may remove target land you control from the game. And whenever a land with the same name as the imprinted card is tapped for mana, its controller adds 1 mana to his or her mana pool of any type that land produced.
Optimally, I'd be running snow-covered islands, but as I'm not sure if I'm going to be blinging this deck out 100% yet, I have not yet bought them. And I don't feel like the downside is terribly high. When I give people islands, if they're not playing in blue, if I give people flood counters, the land's name doesn't change. It just becomes an island. It's not island.
Oh, so they're not going to be able to tap those for extra mana, even though you're giving them islands. I was just thinking that.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, pretty great card. It is going to give all the blue players some extra mana, but not that big of a deal. Next we have Brainstorm, 1 blue for an instant. Draw 3 cards, then put 2 cards from your hand on top of your library in any order.
Oh, basic blue card draw. Good stuff.
Mystic Remora, 1 blue for an enchantment with cumulative upkeep of 1. So on your upkeep, the turn after you play this, you'll have to pay 1 mana or sacrifice it. On your upkeep after that, you'll have to pay 2 mana or sacrifice it. And your upkeep after that, 3 mana, and so on. So anyway, whenever target opponent... Now, this has been updated to say any opponent. Yes. So whenever any opponent successfully casts a non-creature spell, you may draw a card. That player may pay 4 mana to counter this effect.
Yeah, this is the better heuristic study for sure. Well, in most cases.
It can be.
If people are playing creatures, it completely is useless, but
eventually you will sacrifice.
No one is going to pay the 4. No one will pay the 4.
That is the great upside. Yeah, nobody. I've never seen anyone pay 4 mana to stop you from drawing a card. Yeah. With Heuristic Study, they only got to pay 1.
Yeah.
So they'll do it a lot. So there's ups and downs with Mystic Remora, but definitely for 1 blue mana, I think it's worth it. It has a potential of drawing you tons of cards. Mm-hmm. Fabulous draw card spell. Next we have Mystical Tutor. 1 blue for an instant. Search your library for an instant. Interrupt mana source or sorcery card.
It's just instant or sorcery.
All right, instant or sorcery. And reveal that card to all players. Shuffle your library and put that revealed card back on top of it.
Any instant or sorcery. There are plenty in this deck. Any situation I can get myself out of or into with this card.
Yep, just a tutor.
Yep.
Merchant Scroll.
Slightly worse.
1 and a blue for a sorcery. Search your library for a blue instant or interrupt, basically a blue instant. Reveal that card to all players and put it into your hand. Reshuffle your library afterwards.
Yeah, quite good. Straight to hand, has to be an instant, but this can get me like a Mystical Tutor if I want a sorcery, back on top or something like that.
Nice.
Can be quite good.
Next we have Fabricate. 2 and a blue for a sorcery. Search your library for an artifact card, reveal it, put it into your hand, and then shuffle your library.
3 mana to get my Quicksilver Fountain to hand? Yes, please.
So, Manifold Insights. 2 and a blue for a sorcery. Reveal the top 10 cards of your library. Starting with the next opponent in turn order, each opponent chooses a different non-land card from among them. Put the chosen cards into your hand and the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. Wow.
Yeah, this does a ton of work in 4-player games, and if you go beyond that, it's absurd. It has to be non-lands, and my deck isn't running terribly many lands, but you still end up hitting either somewhere between 3 and 4 lands every time this is revealed. So between 6 cards, your opponents have to give you 3 of them.
Yeah, and you know what I really like about this more than... What are the other cards that are similar? Like, they reveal cards and your opponent has to split them into 2 piles.
Like a Fact or Fiction type
right,
effect.
like the difference between them is, like, with Fact or Fiction, if you get a bunch of lands, mostly, then your opponents are like, oh, great, I can, put lands in both piles. But with this, they can only choose the non-lands,
Fact or Fiction does have the upside. Most of those effects have the upside of being instants. This has to be done on your turn, which gives, if they give you quite high-costed things and you're not able to cast them, it lets your opponents know what's coming. Fact or Fiction, usually is done right before your turn, which lets you take most advantage of that. But... Mm-hmm. Yeah. Still an amazing card that I don't see played.
Yeah, and again, if you happen to mostly whiff with lands, it's kind of a good thing, because then they have less choices to give you.
And you won't be drawing them either.
Mm-hmm. All right, Heuristic Study is the famous. Yeah. 2 and a blue for an enchantment. Whenever an opponent plays a spell, you may draw a card unless that player pays 1. Basically, put it in every single blue deck you can. Do it right now.
And if you're playing against it, just assume your spells cost 1 more, please. Please stop letting me draw cards.
Yeah, just pay the mana. Recurring Insight is 4 and 2 blue for a sorcery. Draw cards equal to the number of cards in target opponent's hand, and it has rebound. So if you cast the spell from your hand, you exile it as it resolves, and at the beginning of your next upkeep, you get to cast it again from exile without paying its mana cost.
This is a good card draw spell. The only problem with it is that I've never cast it in this deck. Someone's always taken it from me and cast it themselves. I think this has been cast.
Oh, is that what happened? Like, I feel like this was cast, but maybe Warren cast it from you.
Warren cast it from my deck. I think he's done it 3 times now.
Oh, it was with Chaos Wand.
And I've never cast it.
Oh, well, I remember when Warren cast it anyway. It drew him like 10 cards.
It's quite good. It's quite good.
If you can cast Recurring Insights. Great. Don't let someone else cast it. Blue Sun's Zenith. X blue, blue, blue. Target player draws X cards, and then you shuffle Blue Sun Zenith back into its owner's library.
Yeah, this has the upside of being converted mana cost 3, so I have a couple effects that can let me grab it. And like with a lot of cards in this deck with higher CMCs, I feel like I can get away with it just because so early on in the game I'm going to be stealing artifact ramp from other people. That'll be my primary goal in the early game, is just ramping.
Yeah. Next we have Rapid Hybridization. 1 blue for an instant. That lets you destroy target creature. Pretty rare for blue.
Yes.
So destroy target creature, instant speed. It can't be regenerated. That creature's controller gets a 3/3 green frog lizard creature token.
Yeah, good removal in blue. This and the next card are functionally similar. Functionally the same.
Pongify. 1 blue for an instant. Destroy target creature. It can't be regenerated. That creature's controller gets a 3/3 green ape creature token.
Yeah. I'm partial to the frog beast, but, you know, apes are fine too.
Imprison in the Moon. 2 and a blue for an enchantment aura. You get to enchant any creature, land, or planeswalker. An enchanted permanent becomes a colorless land with tap to add a colorless mana to your mana pool and loses all other card types and abilities.
I'm sad it's not an island, but this is still insane.
Yeah, definitely. And any commander keeps that commander from going back to the command zone.
Yeah, it does not change zones.
Yeah, someone board wipes, it doesn't matter because it's a land, so their commander's not going to die.
Yeah, very mean against a mono red, mono black, or a Rakdos player with no ways to interact with enchantments.
Yeah, that is very true. All right, Swan Song. 1 blue for an instant. Counter target enchantment, instant, or sorcery spell. Its controller gets a 2/2 blue bird creature token with flying.
This might be the only... No, there's one more actual counterspell in the deck that have no other effects. These are just too good not to run.
Yeah, Swan Song is so great. Arcane Denial.
This is the other one.
1 and a blue for an instant. Counter target spell. That spell's controller may draw up to 2 cards at the beginning of the next turn's upkeep. You draw a card at the beginning of the next turn's upkeep.
It's just good. It's just quite good.
Mm-hmm. Split Decision. 1 and a blue. So this is an instant spell which has a Will of the Council. So choose target instant or sorcery spell. Starting with you, each player votes for denial or duplication. If denial gets more votes, you counter the spell. If duplication gets more votes, or if the vote is tied, you copy the spell, and you may choose new targets for the copy.
This is a fantastic counter spell. If you do want a spell countered, it's very likely that most of the board wants the spell countered, so 3 denials is not hard to get. Alternatively, if the person casting their ramp spell really wants that to be pushed through, you are definitely going to get 2 duplications, one from yourself and one from them. This lets you copy quite a lot of things that your one opponent who's casting that spell will want to have happen.
So okay, so I see. So it's either going to get countered completely or you get to copy it.
Yes.
Yeah, nice. Muddle the Mixture. 2 blue for our next Transmute card, which is an instant speed, counter target instant or sorcery spell.
Yeah, so this will mostly be used to transmute up something like Sword of the Animist, but can be used as a counterspell in the late game.
Mm-hmm. Cyclonic Rift. 1 and a blue for an instant, return target non-land permanent you don't control to its owner's hand, or if you pay the overload cost for 7 mana, you return all non-land permanents you don't control to their owner's hands.
Really dumb. Very, very strong.
My personal favorite is casting this in response to someone's discard step, so making them discard most of their things.
Cruel.
Vidalcan Shackles. 3 mana for an artifact. You may choose not to untap Vidalcan Shackles during your untap step. You get to pay 2 mana and tap it to gain control of target creature with power less than or equal to the number of islands you control, as long as Vidalcan Shackles remains tapped.
Yeah, so the previous few cards were all actual pieces of removal. From here on out, it's going to be pseudo removal, things that take opponents' creatures and put them under my control. And Vidalcan Shackles is very good. I'm not going to be getting, Xenagos' 15/15 green-red trample creature from this, but A lot of commanders are very easy to take with this. A lot of very key piece creatures are easy to take with this.
Yeah, and for me, it's, you know, like you said, it's not technically removal,
Yes.
but for me it is removal. You're removing it from their control, and in almost more of a permanent way. I mean, it's harder for them to get it back than with any other form of removal, you know? Like, if they can't get it back from the graveyard, they can't get it back from the command zone, they have to steal it back from your control, which means they have to basically kill it again. Next we have Control Magic for 4 mana, 2 and 2 blue. Enchant creature, you control enchanted creature. Wow, 4 mana.
Yeah, I know, right? Mind Control being 5 mana, this just being a cheaper version of it.
Wow, I didn't even know about this card. 4 mana. Crazy. Okay, next we have Corrupted Conscience. 3 and 2 blue for an enchantment aura. Enchanted creature has Infect. And you control enchanted creature. What?
Yeah, exactly.
You gain control of the thing and give it Infect.
And give it Infect. This can also be played on your own creature if you really feel like it's necessary, which is quite funny. This could be 5 mana, give Thada Adel Infect. This could be 5 mana, give your Stormtide Leviathan Infect.
Yeah, and with Island Walk, that's just perfect.
It's just perfect.
Mind Control.
Here's the Mind Control.
3 and 2 blue.
Yeah, 3 and 2 blue for the same effect. Still worth running, turns out. Still a very nice piece of removal, sort of.
Pretty much, yeah. Pretty much removal. Next we have Volition Reigns. 3 and 3 blue for an enchantment aura. Enchant permanent, so any permanent. When Volition Reigns enters the battlefield, if enchanted permanent is tapped, you get to untap it, and you control enchanted permanent.
Yeah, this takes planeswalkers. This can take lands. I don't know why you would, but you could.
And you get to untap it.
And you get to untap it, which is fantastic if someone has a creature or artifact that can tap for a specific ability, and they do it in response. It doesn't matter. You get it, and it untaps. Yeah,
definitely a slew of the more powerful game control spells here. Perfect for Thada. Desertion, 3 and 2 blue. For an instant, you target you counter target spell. If an artifact or creature spell is countered this way, you put that card onto the battlefield under your control instead of it going into its owner's graveyard.
Yep, this is a counter spell technically. I have a few of them. The other ones were primarily countering spells. These are primarily stealing spells.
Yeah, and you know, worst case scenario, you can still just counter anything with this if you needed to. It's great. Spelljack, 3 and 3 blue for an instant, counter target spell. If it's countered this way, exile it instead of putting it into its owner's graveyard. And as long as it remains exiled, you may play it as though it were in your hand without paying its mana cost. If it has X in its mana cost, X is 0.
Another nice form of counterspell that lets me steal stuff from opponents. Yeah, this isn't just limited to creatures and artifacts.
And it's just for the rest of the game. You get that spell. Like, they can't do anything about that. This is really cool. All right. Gather Specimens is 3 and 3 blue for an instant. If a creature would come into play under an opponent's control this turn, it comes into play under your control instead. Oh my god.
Slightly more limited than Spelljack if you're playing it against a single creature, but if someone plays, say, a Storm Herd for 40 1/1 white flying Pegasi, you get all 40 of those. That's the dream scenario. It'll happen. I have a couple players who do manage to do that quite often, so we'll see.
Next we have Chaos Wand. 3 mana for an artifact. You pay 4 and tap it. Target opponent exiles cards from the top of their library. Until they exile an instant or sorcery card, you may cast that card without paying its mana cost. Then put the exiled cards that weren't cast this way on the bottom of that library in a random order.
Speaking of Storm Herd, this is a good card against opponents that you know they have very high cost effects in their instants and sorceries in their deck. It's generally just valuable anyway. It's fun, it gets you a lot of stuff, and you don't have to cast the things. Target the blue player if someone plays a spell you don't want and you don't have a counter spell, you might get one.
Yeah, and you know, also, I mean, even when people like me, you know, I'm always like, I hardly have any instants or sorceries in my deck. You know, I always got at least one left. I've never actually had this completely whiff on me before. I have seen someone eventually get all of their instants and sorceries played with Chaos Wand, and then what happened was all of the cards just went back in a random order. So it's not like it mills the opponent if they don't have any. All right, next we have Acquire. 3 and 2 blue for a sorcery. Search target opponent's library for an artifact card and put that card into play under your control. Then that player shuffles his or her library.
Yeah, with Thada, this basically says, I pay 5 mana for your 8, 9, 10 cost artifact. It's fantastic. I know what's in your deck, I know what's worth getting, and it's a discount on what I would normally have to pay.
Yeah, just straight up another Thada effect right there.
Yep.
Blatant Thievery, 4 and 3 blue. For each opponent, gain control of target permanent that player controls. Boo!
This is a fun card. I very much enjoy casting it, and I very much everyone enjoys this. It's great.
It's also a card that lots of people have critiqued the artwork. I mean, what's going on with that wing there coming out of the shoulder, buddy? It's just kind of weird. It's funny. Okay. Next, we got Knowledge Exploitation. 5 and 2 blue for a tribal sorcery rogue.
Oh, more rogue sorceries.
It's got Prowl 4, so you may play this for its Prowl cost if you've dealt combat damage to a player this turn with a rogue, so possibly only paying 4 mana. To search target opponent's library for an instant or sorcery card, you may play that card without paying its mana cost, and then that player shuffles his or her library.
Yeah, Thada Adel, turns out, is a rogue, and she is swinging, and most people will have islands by this point in the game. Yeah. And I already know what's in your deck. This allows me to grab board wipes if I need them. It allows me to grab anything.
Yeah, and I think most of the Prowl things are rogue specific.
Yes.
Right? Some of them have like extra creature types you can also use with it, but most of them always say rogue. So really great spells in rogue decks, because rogues are, just built to deal the damage. They're built to be evasive. Next we have Expropriate.
Oh, yes.
Yay!
My least favorite card to run, but one that I feel like I need to show others that run it how absolutely awful it is. How much I hate this card.
Give them a taste of their own medicine.
Yes.
Huh?
Oh my gosh.
So we have 7 and 2 blue, 9 mana total for a sorcery with the Council's Dilemma. It is quite a dilemma. Starting with you, each player votes for time or money. For each time vote, you get to take an extra turn after this one. For each money vote, choose a permanent owned by the voter and gain control of it, and then you exile Expropriate.
Yeah, this at worst is a blatant thievery that lets you take an extra turn.
Yeah.
At best, your opponents give you extra turns for some reason. It happens, and I don't know why.
I have, every once in a while you see someone whiff on their extra turns, right? But it's pretty rare.
This deck is not meant to take advantage of extra turns terribly well. I can generally steal more things, but as this is the only extra turn spell in the deck, and it exiles itself upon resolution, I don't really have a way to abuse extra turns.
Yeah. Too bad you couldn't put this under Isochron Scepter. Meekstone is 1 mana for an artifact. No creatures with power greater than 2 untap during their controller's untap phase.
So it turns out people really don't like you taking their stuff for some reason. It's up there kind of with Mill in the sort of irrational hatred. I understand. I feel the same way when it happens to me, but it's certainly not the end of the world. So I need ways to keep people from attacking me.
Yep, just more of those shields. And Thada is just power 2, so it's not going to affect her. Crawl Space, 3 mana for an artifact. No more than 2 creatures can attack you each combat.
Yeah, it doesn't help when your opponent's going tall, but against go-wide strategies, this is very, very nice.
Propaganda, 2 and a blue for an enchantment. Creatures can't attack you unless their controller pays 2 mana for each creature he or she controls that's attacking you.
It's kind of funny how frequently people will cast spells in their main phase before moving to combat without realizing that they can no longer pay for this effect.
Yep, absolutely. Or often they'll just say, I attack you, and you go, reminder, you can't.
Yeah.
They just forget.
And it takes the heat off quite well early on. If you get this down on turn 3, no one's going to be attacking you for a while. Everyone wants to develop their boards.
Yeah.
It's so good.
Yeah. Stolen Identity is 4 and 2 blue. And it's a sorcery. It says, create a token that's a copy of target artifact or creature, and it has cipher, so you may exile this spell encoded on a creature you control after you cast it. Whenever that creature deals combat damage to a player, its controller may cast a copy of the encoded card without paying its mana cost.
Yeah, this is just another clone, but one that's repeatable, especially with something like an unblockable Thada Adel.
Mm-hmm. Black Blade Reforged is 2 mana for a legendary artifact equipment. Equipped creature gets +1/+1 for each land you control. The equip cost is normally 7, but if you're equipping it on a legendary creature, it's only 3.
Yeah, so without really many ways to finish out the game outside of the Quicksilver Fountain lock, the Black Blade Reforged is a very good way to push through commander damage. And with something like Corrupted Conscious, that's now, I mean, with 8 lands, that's now a 10/10 infect creature with Island Lock.
Yeah, and I believe the other day you made a copy of Black Blade Reforged and you had 2 of them.
I did have 2 of them, yes.
That was pretty busted.
That is a good one.
On to the land base.
Mm-hmm.
So, this deck runs only 35 lands, which it can because it's mono blue, and it has 5 non-basics, so we got Lonely Sandbar, enters tapped, it taps for a blue, but you can cycle it for 1 blue.
Yeah, I don't think I've really, unless this is in your opening hand, it's going to be cycled for a blue.
Mm-hmm.
The reason I get away with 35 lands is, again, I am playing mono blue. It is quite high converted mana cost for the deck. I think I'm a little further down. Sorry.
Oh.
Further. Yeah, right there. 3.31 average converted mana cost. Generally, I like to be under 3 for my decks. So I would normally run more lands, but because I am going to be stealing everyone's artifact ramp, I feel like I get away with it just fine, and I haven't had troubles.
Yeah, that's a great point. You are definitely stealing a lot of ramp there. And yeah, cycling cards just great for when you're flooded, you have too much mana, you just pay a mana and you draw something else. Remote Isle is a land that comes into play tapped. It taps to add a blue, or you can cycle it away for 2 mana.
Yep.
Next we have Teleria West. It comes into play tapped. It taps to add a blue, or you can transmute it for 3.
Right, so this gets me one of the next 2 lands. That is basically all it does.
Okay, so we have Rogue's Passage. Taps to add a colorless, or you can pay 4 and tap it, and target creature can't be blocked this turn.
Yep, that is great with Thada. If people don't want islands for some reason, I try and give them away. No one wants them. This makes sure Thada can get through regardless.
Yeah. And the next one is Ghost Town.
Oh, yeah.
When I saw this, I was confused. So let's see. Taps to add a colorless mono to your mana pool. You can pay 0 and return it to its owner's hand. Use this ability only during another player's turn. So what's up with this card?
So this is the Quicksilver Fountain lock. Basically, every time we go around the table, if at some point all lands are islands and my opponents are refusing to play more lands from hand just to get rid of their own islands, what I can, in effect, do is play this on my turn after the Quicksilver Fountain's effect has gone off. I don't have an island. As we go around the table, I can then return it to my hand, effectively always dodging the Quicksilver Fountain effect.
I see.
When it has a flood counter on it, I can return it to my hand on an opponent's turn. It basically will keep the game state from ever letting Quicksilver Fountain remove all the flood counters.
Oh, okay, I see. Yeah, you return it to your hand and you get to play it again, so it doesn't get a flood counter ever.
Yeah.
And you always have something that's not an island out. Pretty great. And speaking of islands, the deck runs a total of 30 islands. And that's it. That's Thada Adel Acquisitor. So, I hope y'all enjoyed the video. If you did, please hit that like button or that subscribe button. I'd really appreciate it. This is Eric from Bane Alley Magic signing off. Until next time, take care, take it easy.
Later.